From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I'm Carla Gonzalez. This is From the South. We begin in Colombia, where indigenous, campesino, and Afro-descendant organizations are stressing the importance of their fight in defense of land rights. At a press conference, leaders of ONIC, the main indigenous organization, said they will continue demanding that the current government respects their right to land ownership. They also said they won't remain silent and that their protests will continue. Earlier, demonstrators blocked the border bridge which connects to Ecuador. Indigenous, campesino, and Afro-Colombian citizens have protested for 17 days now, calling on the government of Iván Duque to respect agreements about their land rights reached back in 2013. They were violently repressed by the police last week, who used live ammunition on protesters. Our correspondent, José Manuel Jiménez, has the latest.
The situation of the armed conflict in Colombia is worsening as days go by. On Tuesday, opposition lawmakers urged the government to clarify what its approach and policies on peace will be. At least 140 social leaders have been killed in the last 7 months. 50% of those are members of the Colombian Indigenous movement. This is one of the main reasons the social minga continues in the southeast of Colombia after more than 16 days. They're calling for a meeting with President Iván Duque in the department of Cauca to open talks with their leaders. They're also calling for respect for life, territories, and the commitments signed by the previous government that have not been fulfilled. Also the inclusion of the ethnic issue in the National Plan for Development and, obviously, the implementation of the peace agreements. According to the International Committee of the Red Cross, in Colombia there are currently 5 armed conflicts going on in different regions. The constant killing of social leaders is evidence of that. Another proof of the armed conflict is the massive displacement of campesinos in different regions. Recently, human rights defenders and the Ombudsman have denounced that last March the 21st in the south of the department of Córdoba and in the north of Antioquia, in Ituango, 120 families were displaced due to the confrontation between armed groups. And also on March the 25th in Rio Sucio in San Jose, 230 people were also displaced. The humanitarian crisis gets worse in Colombia every day. According to the Ombudsman, in 2019 at least 9,000 people have been displaced. Let's recall that one of the commitments made in the peace agreements was to put an end to paramilitary groups. But as we can see, this has yet to be accomplished. For that reason, social movements say they will continue with their struggle.
That was José Manuel Jiménez from Colombia. And a debate was held on Monday in Colombia's Congress over the political control of the peace agreements and how their implementation can move forward. Many feel that the government is deliberately ignoring these discussions in the hopes of putting an end to the agreements.
During a debate over the implementation of the peace agreement, Senator Iván Cepeda announced that he will formally accuse the President and the Attorney General for not complying with the peace agreements.
I have interjected in front of the Investigative Commission and the lower house. It may be symbolic, but I have accused the President and the AG of violating the Constitution.
The debate went on without the presence of officials who must carry out the implementation of the peace agreements, like Miguel Ceballos, Commissioner of Peace, and Emilio Artilla, Commissioner of Post-Conflict Issues, among others.
We have complained to the public prosecutor about the actions of Mr. Emilio José Archila and other ministers who failed to come to this meeting with absolutely no excuse.
Many feel that peace has not been given the importance it deserves during the 7 months of Iván Duque's government. He has not even met with the Congress Commission for Peace.
We have even asked foreign diplomats to please ask the President to speak with us. But the President has not even considered giving us a meeting. He has not even answered our letters. His attitude is increasingly discouraging.
For their part, the defense minister once again used the strategy of blaming the previous government for the slow progress of the implementation of the peace agreements.
President Duque does not want to put an end to the peace agreements. He wants to implement them. But the problem is that there's no resources for doing so.
The few officials of the government who took part in the debate could not say with clarity what their policies for achieving peace is.
Paraguayan police have stopped an indigenous and campesino mobilization in the capital, Asunción. The organizations began to rally to demand the government returns expropriated land and respect their rights. But the police reportedly told them they are not authorized to mobilize due to a controversial law that limits the right of demonstration. As power in Venezuela continues to be restored, certain areas reported fresh outages early on Wednesday. But the government says this is a normal part of the stabilization process. Authorities say that a full and stable restoration of electricity will be achieved progressively. Meanwhile, the public prosecutor's office has said an investigation was opened to find out who's behind the newest attack. On Monday, both a new cyber attack and a physical sabotage on the country's main hydroelectric plant led to countrywide power outages.
Venezuelans faced 2 new attacks on their electrical systems on Monday, March 25th. The first, at midday, revealed to have been an electromagnetic attack, was brought under control by the authorities over the course of the afternoon.
The first event, with similar characteristics to that perpetrated on March 7th, occurred on Monday at 1:29 p.m. and caused a loss of charge, which was rapidly recovered by workers. And through the coordination of the Bolivarian government with Corpoelec, recovery was efficient, and from 7 p.m. onward, the system was working at peak performance.
But then, at 10 o'clock at night, a second power cut occurred, which went on for more than 12 hours and forced the country to suspend classes and most work activities on Tuesday the 26th. This was after a blaze was started, where transformers at the Guri Dam are located.
At 9:47 p.m. on Monday, March 25th, criminals set a huge fire in the transformer area at Guri, which affected 3 transformers at the station, as well as the wiring, which allows transmission.
Despite the magnitude of the attack, contingency plans went into action quickly. The power outage meant that the subway was out of service, but a provisional bus system ensured commuting around Caracas continued.
We should get used to it, because the opposition are already asking for a military intervention and war. What's happening now is just as bad as war. Not having electricity, water, transport, or food. It may be worse.
They are not causing harm to just one person. We are all Venezuelans. If they care about us, even a little bit, they wouldn't do this.
On the other hand, Simón Bolívar International Airport functioned as normal thanks to a generator. Health authorities said medical care was not threatened by the interruption in the power supply, and water in hospitals was guaranteed by tankers nonetheless. The military is now reinforcing the country's power grid.
The Bolivarian armed forces have been deployed here. We're not going to get tired. We have the will to overcome, to go past any enemy of the country. Our president ordered us to ensure that the electricity system functions, and we will do so.
At around midday, electricity began to return, but in an unstable manner, with partial cuts throughout the afternoon. Still, the people are ready for new attacks.
I have a battery-powered radio, candles, and a flashlight. But will this continue? I hope not, because this is a problem for everyone.
The Venezuelan Public Ministry has started a criminal investigation into those responsible for the fire at the plant. Meanwhile, school and work remain suspended for Wednesday.
For more on this, we have our correspondent Marilyn Garcia in Caracas, who has more information.
Hola, muy buenos días.
Electricity is still being restored little by little, but it remains partially unstable, given the impact of the latest attack on the power grid, in particularly on the transformers feeding off the dam of Guri. The damage of the fire was such that restoration is taking longer than expected. Nonetheless, workers are making progress despite the difficulties. On Monday, the power grid was attacked twice again. First, at 1:25 p.m., the system was attacked remotely just like on March 7. Once the system was near back to normal, at around 9 p.m., a high-voltage transformer yard was set on fire at the Guri Dam, which provides most of the electricity to the country. 3 auto transformers were set on fire, and one was completely destroyed along with the cabling. This is why power is returning in stages, and why there was another outage earlier on Wednesday. Nonetheless, contingency plans have been carried out, which include providing energy and clean water for hospitals, as well as food, water, and transport. In certain areas of the country, the power is still out, but authorities reassure citizens it will return. Citizens remain calm after this latest attack. Venezuelans continue to show great resilience in the face of all these attacks. Many are grateful about the openness of the government about sharing information and how quickly they have reacted to restore power, while also being shocked by images that show the extent of the destruction caused. The Prosecutor General has announced that an in-depth investigation is underway on these attacks.
Smiling Garcia from Venezuela. Now, other stories, Algerians have questioned the initiation of Article 102 of the Constitution to remove the president, calling it outdated. The army chief cited the article on Tuesday to declare Abdelaziz Bouteflika unfit to govern. Protesters have said that this article is not the solution, as the current government will still rule. This follows weeks of mass protests demanding the president step down.
The activation of this article could have been done already when he had his stroke, so why suddenly wait until 6 years later to activate it? But in fact, I think this is not a good solution. It means that the will of the people has not been respected, because the motto was clear and precise. The claims are clear for the removal of the entire system.
Meanwhile, artists in Algeria have organized open-air debates in front of the National Theatre, encouraging citizens to speak out, calling it a means of reclaiming space. People are allowed to debate and dialogue about any issue.
It's a free debate. We do not really have teams because people really need to reclaim this space, to learn to speak out loud. Hence the fact that I do not want microphones, because often I'm told I should bring a microphone. But it's also important to see people engage physically and not be shy to talk about themselves or their opinions.
Journalist and political analyst Hafsa Kara Mustafa joined us earlier to discuss the situation in Algeria.
Well, according to the Constitution, it's very clear it would be the head of parliament who will take over for the following 45 days. It would become an interim president, and then it will set the stage to organize elections from which all parties and all sides can have a candidate. So essentially, if this article is put in place and Bouteflika is removed from power, the Constitution is very much equipped to ensure the transitional period. That wouldn't be a problem. The only problem, of course, would be if protesters are happy with this option. And sadly, we're already seeing emerging through social media people who are saying, well, they don't want this transition because this transition only extends the current system lifespan. And that's what they don't want to see. So this is a major turning point. And of course, it all comes to the point where what happens next. This is an important decision that should appeal to a majority of protesters. However, sadly, at this moment, there is still encouragement coming from social media, essentially, to say that the struggle has to continue and the protests must continue. But this is a decision that should bring about a suitable compromise for both sides of what essentially is becoming an emerging conflict between mass population and the ruling authorities.
We'll take a short break now. Don't go away.
The life is full of moments. Moments of fight. Moments of hope. Moments that transcend. Moments that you can live in. Telesur documentaries. Sundays. Only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Guatemala's Electoral Court is appealing a decision by the Supreme Court that allows the daughter of the former dictator Efrain Rios Montt to run for the presidency. Suri Rios has come under fire for her candidacy since the Constitution bans the relatives of leaders of the dictatorship from running for office. Her father, Efrain Rios Montt, was charged with genocide and crimes against humanity committed during his rule in the 80s. His trial was still in progress when he died in 2018. President Jair Bolsonaro has suffered a significant defeat in Congress over control of the budget. Members of the lower house voted by over 2/3 in favor of a constitutional amendment that would reduce the share of the federal budget that the president can control. At present, the president has discretion over about 10% of the budget. The rest goes on so-called obligatory spending, including salaries and pensions. If passed by the Senate, the amendment would give the executive discretion over just 3%. The prosecutor's office in Brazil has rejected Bolsonaro's order to commemorate the military coup of 1964. The institution said in a statement that the idea of celebrating the start of the military dictatorship is extremely serious and a disrespect for democracy. Bolsonaro ordered the armed forces to properly commemorate the coup that led to a dictatorship which lasted more than 20 years. Citizens and lawmakers have reacted to the president's orders. Bolsonaro is a former army captain who has strongly supported the military and has said he does not consider the start of the dictatorship to have been a coup.
Unfortunately, Brazil has continuously been ashamed in front of the international eyes, either by interventionist policies or by celebrating a time that no country in Latin America, including Chile, that lived through the regime of Pinochet for so long. But it seems Bolsonaro wants this to come back.
I think Bolsonaro should be ashamed to ask this nation that has suffered so to commemorate what happened in 1964. Bolsonaro is ashamed for this country. The people that voted for him must be very ashamed.
It shouldn't be celebrated in any way, but the population, in a certain way, made it happen. The population voted for him.
The parents of the 43 missing students from Ayotzinapa in Mexico continue to demand justice 5 years after the forced disappearance. A truth commission created by the current government is expected to investigate the case.
People in Mexico haven't forgotten that security agents kidnapped 43 students in Ayotzinapa in the state of Guerrero between the nights of September 26th and 27th in 2014.
Ayotzi vive, vive! La lucha sigue, sigue!
Relatives of the missing students are hopeful that the work of the Truth Commission investigating the case will help them know what really happened to their loved ones. This commission was established through a presidential decree in December 2018.
We recognize that the government did some work by creating this Truth Commission, but we still need to know where our children are. When the government will provide us with some concrete answers, then only they will have our full trust.
In the coming days, the federal government is expected to choose who will lead a special prosecutor in office responsible for the investigation.
We are expecting the new investigators to be named soon and hope that they will follow the guidelines that we have demanded, especially to investigate the military personnel and the federal police who were involved. We also want that investigators examine the phone calls made related to the disappearance and the cell phones which were seized following the kidnapping.
On March 21st, the Deputy Secretary for Human Rights of the country said that there are some new testimonies that could help to resolve the case. According to official numbers, at least 40,000 people are still missing in Mexico.
The Caribbean is mourning the loss of one of its most treasured broadcasters. Jamaica's Doreen Samuels has died at the age of 59 after battling cancer. Samuels became a journalist in 1981 after her talent was spotted when she visited Radio Jamaica as a finalist in the Miss Jamaica World Pageant. A longtime employee of the Radio Jamaica Gleaner Group, the veteran journalist has been hailed as the gold standard for broadcasting. Her death marks the end of an era when Samuels ruled Radio Jamaica's airways for almost 4 decades.
I was following her illness, but somehow I thought that she would recover. You know, Doreen is an icon. We would all have grown up listening to Doreen Samuels, and she did it so effortlessly, so professionally, so reassuringly. I don't believe that you're going to see another broadcaster of her caliber and stature for a little while.
A team of paleontologists has discovered a fossil of a 700,000-year-old giant bear in the Argentinian town of San Pedro. According to the museum's paleontology director, the bear would have had a body mass of about 800 kilograms. The skull of the animal was found in a high state of conservation. That would allow tomographies to learn if the bear species had a good sense of smell, sight, and equilibrium to climb trees. More stories coming up. We'll be back.
The Pakistani journalist Tariq Ali examines the mass media influence promoted by imperialism. Get access to the analysis of the socio-economic and political life of the whole South America on our screen and platform in English. A critical place committed to the truth to determine the major events that transformed the world today. On Monday, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. An attack by suspected Boko Haram fighters in eastern Niger has left at least 12 people dead, including the 2 suicide bombers. According to witnesses, 2 bombers blew themselves and then gunmen launched attacks on a police barrack and the city hall. In the last 10 years, Boko Haram has killed over 27,000 people and displaced more than 1 million across Nigeria, Niger, Chad, and Cameroon. Aid continues to arrive in Zimbabwe for the victims of Cyclone Idai, which left a trail of destruction and hundreds of people dead in southern African region. Despite the significant amount of aid that has already arrived, thousands of people still remain in need of shelter, water, food, and medical supplies. The United Nations said Cyclone Idai may be the worst weather-induced disaster to have hit the southern hemisphere.
People lost everything. So for us to say we need this or that, I think we will be understating. Whatever anyone can provide, it will be desperately needed.
A report by research organization Afrobarometer has revealed that more than 1/3 of young Africans have considered leaving their countries. But contrary to the notion that North America and Europe are the preferred destinations, the report indicates that most would be migrants within Africa. The report shows that over 58% of respondents interviewed in Southern Africa preferred staying within the region. Dozens of unidentified victims of deadly flash floods and landslides in Indonesia have been buried in a mass grave. Nearly 2 weeks after the disaster, 90 people have been reported missing, while the official death toll stands at 112. Thousands of people in the eastern province of Papua are now living in makeshift tents since the incident. UK Prime Minister Theresa May is scheduled to meet with Tory backbenchers to gain their support for Brexit. The meeting comes as MPs prepare to vote on the matter. Earlier this week, she explained that there was not enough votes for Brexit.
But it is with great regret that I have had to conclude that as things stand, there is still not sufficient support in the House to bring back the deal for a third meaningful vote. I continue to have discussions with colleagues across the House to build support so that we can bring the vote forward this week and guarantee Brexit.
And the European Union's chief Brexit negotiator, Michel Barnier, says the Good Friday peace agreement for Northern Ireland will continue to apply in all Brexit scenarios. Concerns have been raised on the fragile peace situation in Northern Ireland and the consequences that Brexit is bringing to the country.
Mr. Nicholson, just a few words in the case of the no deal. In all scenarios, the Good Friday Agreement will continue to apply. The United Kingdom will remain a co-guarantor of that agreement and is expected to uphold it in spirit and in letter. The Commission is ready to make additional resources available to Ireland, technical and financial, to address any additional challenges.
A secretive group known as the Cheolima Civil Defense is taking responsibility for the raid at the North Korean embassy in Spain. The raid occurred days before a key summit between U.S. President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un in Vietnam last month. The organization hijacked computers, a phone and a hard drive. A ballet company has premiered in St. Petersburg, Russia with the moves of Jagger. The 8-minute show called Port Rouge is set up to the music of the Rolling Stones. Mick Jagger's partner and U.S. dancer Melanie Hamrick masterminded the production, featuring classic Stones tracks such as Painted Black, You Can't Always Get What You Want, and She's a Rainbow. And we come to the end of this news brief, but you can find these and more stories by going to our website, telesurenglish.net. For our viewers in Africa, you can find us on Starsat channel 461 in South Africa and 539 in Nigeria, and you can join us on social media. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.